example, the USDA was literally using taxpayer dollars to fly to China, go to the wet markets, these filthy wet markets, have dogs and cats slaughtered, take their meat home on commercial airlines in their fly up in their carry-on luggage. This is with tax dollars, and then force feed cat meat to kittens at a government laboratory in Maryland. And that went on for 30 years.
Gain of function research. Gain of function refers to basically the serial passaging of microorganisms, making them more transmissible, more virulent, giving them an immunogenicity that allows the virus to basically, in a way, move quickly through a population. That is a gain of function. You are gaining function of the virus. And that is what was happening in Wuhan laboratories. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. In a way, we're going to be talking about how your taxpayer dollars, yes, your taxpayer dollars, used by the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, under the direction of Dr. Anthony Fauci, were not only used in Wuhan laboratories, and I believe, based on what we are seeing, the evidence that is coming out in the Senate and in Congress, allowed for the research, the gain of function research that killed millions and changed our planet forever under COVID-19, not only allowed for that, but how it is still continuing to this day. And there is absolutely no oversight, and we have proof of that now, no oversight on the money that we are sending overseas to laboratories conducting this very monster-like science, right? That could be a detriment to humanity, to our children, to our way of life, but also how groups like the NIH and others, universities and others, are using taxpayer dollars for the most horrific experiments on animals you could ever imagine. And not because they're actually working on, science experiments that are going to change our lives. These are experiments, many of which are done wastefully, wasting lives and wasting our money. That is why I have Justin Goodman on today. He is the Senior Vice President at the White Coat Waste Project. I met the folks at White Coat Waste Project actually in 2015 when I was working with Glenn Beck. I had a show on the Glenn Beck Network called For the Record. It was an incredible show where we did investigations and we exposed in 2015 what was happening to beagles in these NIH experiments that were just heartbreaking and cruel and wrong. And for more than a decade, because they're lining their pockets with your taxpayer dollars, they were running these beagles. And by the way, thank you, Dr. Anthony Fauci. He was behind it, right? He was behind it. It was like the fox guarding the hen house when the Trump administration hired him on, because that's why he wanted the job so bad. He wanted to protect himself and those involved from his role in the COVID project. Just like he failed with HIV and AIDS, he knew, just like Senator Rand Paul has been stating, that his involvement in shipping money over to Wuhan laboratories, and by the way, other laboratories in China and in other places of the world, could potentially and did lead to these massive outbreaks. And this outbreak, COVID-19, wait till you hear what some of these experiments are that are going on overseas in Russia, in China, and in other parts of the world. And wait until we prove to you with Justin Goodman, who is here on this show, and he is amazing. You do not want to miss this. He is the Senior Vice President at the White Coat Waste Project. And folks, I'm not talking about some kind of, PETA and ideological beliefs. I'm talking about using your taxpayer dollars wastefully spending it on experiments that are so cruel that it is gut-wrenching. And not only are these experiments cruel, but I believe more importantly, in my opinion, could lead to the spread of viruses far worse than what we saw with COVID-19. That is why you do not want to miss this show. You do not want to miss this. Justin Goodman is going to lay it out for you, and he's also going to give you a way that you can become involved in an effort to stop this and to save our children and to save, for crying out loud, the future of humanity from these nutsos like that are conducting these experiments without any oversight overseas with your taxpayer dollars. Folks, gold and silver, it allows you to protect what you have worked so hard for. And Allegiance Gold is a sponsor of the Sara Carter Show. We could not make this happen without Allegiance Gold. And because reputation is very important to me, that's the reason why it's the only company that I recommend. Right now, they're offering $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. My friends at Allegiance Gold can help protect your IRA, your 401k with physical gold and silver, or have it delivered securely right to your front door. Get $5,000 now free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. So don't wait. Call or click today. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, no H, S-A-R-A. Or go to protectwithsara.com. That's protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, S-A-R-A, no H. Or go to protectwithsara.com. Don't just trust me. Look for yourself, and you'll see why Allegiance Gold has the highest ratings in the industry. So happy to have Justin Goodman on the show. He's the Senior Vice President at the White Coat Waste Project. And Justin, I am so sorry because we have been trying to get this scheduled, and it's been my fault. I've been traveling a lot. We've had a lot of issues trying to connect, but now we are here together, and I'm so grateful to have you on the Sara Carter Show.
I'm thrilled to be here. It's an honor. And, you're one of our first champions. You really helped launch this organization off the ground into, public consciousness and, back in 2015. And we're grateful, and we've never looked back since, but we owe a huge debt of gratitude to you and, the piece you did at the Blaze back then.
Well, thank you so much. It was such an eye opener for me as well. I mean, I have a great passion and love for animals, of course. And I believe, in doing things appropriately in the right way. And I thought, what an incredible organization, White Coat Waste Project, because I didn't even realize back then. And I remember seeing my husband was so distressed. Here's an Army guy, big guy, raised on a farm, uncles hunted, all that stuff, right? But when he found out that there were these wasteful, unbelievable experiments happening to beagles and monkeys, and these were all happening at the National Institutes of Health with their permission, and it was these reoccurring, unbelievable experiments that were happening every year, the same exact ones, going nowhere. I'm gonna let you explain some of that and why this organization is so important, because not only does your organization save animals from this cruel, inhumane, unbelievable experimental projects that guys like Dr. Anthony Fauci actually backed, just for all you folks out there who are listening to this, but it's also a waste of taxpayer dollars. So explain what's going on here.
Yeah, thanks, Sara. I've been doing this work full-time for about 20 years, working to expose taxpayer-funded animal experiments. I was a graduate student at the University of Connecticut in the early 2000s. And my wife and I got to that campus and discovered there was a monkey lab there that no one knew about. And they were buying monkeys with taxpayer money and then giving them brain damage, injecting acid into the part of their brain that controlled their eyes, and then inserting electrodes in their brains and making them watch TV screens to study whether, when they destroyed that part of the brain that controlled eye movements, whether the monkeys could track targets on a TV screen. They then killed the monkeys and cut their brains out. And records that we were able to get, again, I was a student activist. I was learning as I went, but we were able to expose all of this waste and abuse in this laboratory. They were yanking these monkeys so roughly by the neck, through these collars on the neck, that their eyes were bleeding because they were fighting so hard against these experimenters. So I exposed all this waste and abuse and was in a PhD program. And I was like, my heart is really in activism to stop these government-funded animal abusers, not in academia. So I went into this work full time and discovered, really one of the best kept secrets in Washington is that taxpayers are the single largest funder of animal testing in the entire world. The government is the market maker and has cornered the market on animal experimentation. It's not cosmetics companies anymore. It's not private companies. It's Uncle Sam wasting about $20 billion of our money each year, 20 billion with a B, on animal tests that, keep in mind, most taxpayers, Democrats, Republicans, independents alike, oppose for ethical, scientific, economic reasons. And also the agencies like the NIH that are forcing us to pay $20 billion a year for this stuff admit at every turn how wasteful and inefficient it is, but it's big business. So they keep funding it anyway. And there's actually lobbying groups here in Washington that literally exist just to get more money for animal testing and to fight against any restrictions on funding for animal testing. So at White Coat, what we do, we use a model we call it FED, since we work on federal policy: find, expose, defund. And that's what White Coat's been doing since 2015 when you featured us in Socialized Science on The Blaze.
I know. And wow, that was such an eye-opener. I tell you, it was the biggest show on The Blaze that we did on For the Record. For the Record was the TV show that I hosted then. Joe Weasel was the director. We did a very intensive series of stories that you guided us on. I mean, and exposed these. And this is where I want to go. So for all of you out there who are just like, oh, well, this is, is this some kind of PETA thing? Is this some kind of, you guys aren't fully on board with what we're talking about because you think we're somehow, what would you describe it? Like, how would somebody think of this that doesn't understand what animal testing is all about? And I just, before we get there, I'm going to let you explain that, because you got both sides of this. You understood this from being with PETA a long time ago and then moving to the White Coat Waste Project. So explain that.
That's right. Yeah. I spent 10 years at PETA running their animal testing campaigns. And what I learned during my time there, I'm proud of the work I did there, but what I learned during my time there is that, number one, you can't have a litmus test for people. We need to build the biggest movement possible, and being judgy about all kinds of personal choices people make is going to turn them off to getting them on board with issues they do agree with you on. So, at White Coat, we talk about uniting liberty lovers and animal lovers and finding common ground and highlighting and emphasizing areas we have in common, not accentuating our differences. So for White Coat, the litmus test is, if you don't want to pay you don't want the government to force you to pay to torture kittens and puppies and experiments, you're with us. You're on our team. We don't care if you eat meat, hunt, wear fur in the winter. Doesn't matter to us. We are a wide tent organization. So that's the number one thing, is that you don't have to be a vegetarian. We have libertarians, vegetarians, Democrats, Republicans, everyone is welcome here. That's what we're all about. And it's true. I do a lot of lobbying for White Coat. I work with everyone from the Freedom Caucus to the Squad and everyone in between. And we are able, that's how we get stuff done, is bringing together strange bedfellows, whether it's on Main Street or Capitol Hill, to get them to work towards a common goal. And that's been the success of White Coat Waste, is that we truly are about bringing people together. And, we don't care whether people oppose animal testing because they don't want to see the government waste money, or they hate Anthony Fauci, or they want to help animals, or in most cases, all of the above.
Right.
And I think that's been kind of the secret sauce for us, is really coming out with open arms and saying, if you agree with us on this one thing, join the team.
And this is where I absolutely. And I think that's brilliant. I think it should be bipartisan. We should look at this no matter what we believe in. I was just talking to someone about an issue that was very similar yet different earlier today, where I was saying these should be bipartisan issues. I mean, there is no reason why. Let's use the beagle and we'll explain this. So when I did this at the Blaze, and I'm sure they can go to White Coat Waste Project on the web and see some of that video there on your website. We were showing one of the big issues or crisis that you exposed was the NIH's wasteful spending of taxpayer dollars on these beagle experiments, where they would have these beagles on treadmills, cute little beagles, and they would just run them to death until they had their hearts exploded on the treadmills. It was horrific. But they did it every year. It wasn't like anything new came out of these studies. They were taking taxpayer funding by conducting these experiments that were going nowhere and just doing them every year. And I think they were pocketing a good portion of the money. So they were not only torturing these beautiful little critters that we love so much, that give so much happiness to people in the world, dogs, these beautiful dogs, but they were actually pocketing that money. And this is what you do. You expose these unnecessary experiments that are really not helping any human being get better. It isn't even helping develop new medicines. These are just experiments that the NIH and other universities are using to gain funding from the government, right? You can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, all of that is 100% right. Our approach is different than a group like PETA or virtually any of the other establishment organizations, and that our approach to this is a free market approach. We're not talking about banning things. None of our campaigns or legislative efforts is focused on banning things, except maybe gain of function, which no one should be doing. Supercharging viruses, private money, public money, no one should be doing that. But for other animal experimentation, our challenge to the government and to we call them the white coats, the animal experimenters, is find your own goddamn funding. Mm-hmm. Don't force us to pay for it. If your project is so valuable and has so much promise, go to the Gates Foundation, go to the many different private organizations who are generously donating money to medical research. Billions of dollars in private money goes to medical experimentation each year. Go compete in the market. But don't force taxpayers to basically fund these projects for decades and decades and decades where there's no incentive to innovate, because the second you solve the problem, the money stops.
Right.
So there's actually the opposite is true with the government, is that the problem existing is actually a job creating venture for a lot of people, and they don't want to innovate. So we've exposed and shut down projects. For example, the USDA was literally using taxpayer dollars to fly to China, go to the wet markets, these filthy wet markets, have dogs and cats slaughtered, take their meat home on commercial airlines in their carry-on luggage. This is with tax dollars, and then force feed cat meat to kittens at a government laboratory in Maryland. And that went on for 30 years.
Okay.
Thousands of kittens dead, millions of cats dead.
Yeah. And not only that, you're transmitting, probably what they're doing is some type of experiment that is transmitting of viruses or bacteria or disease from one. We can't even fly into the country with a fig. Like, I was in Israel and they're like, you don't have any fruit on you, do you? But somebody else is like flying in with kitten meat and cannibalizing our kittens here by forcing them to eat their own meat. I mean, that's disgusting. Folks, I hope you saw the movie Sound of Freedom. It is absolutely amazing. I know so many people in Texas that have seen it or who are going to see it since it came out on July 4th. It opens your eyes to the cruelty of human trafficking, but also the inspiration of what one person can do to save children's lives. Thank you again, Eduardo Verostegui, for this incredible film, Sound of Freedom, that exposes the fact that nearly 2 million children are trafficked around the world every year. And this movie raises the awareness of that and gives us the tools that we need to make a difference. Sound of Freedom is out right now. Purchase your tickets online. New theaters are added daily, so check the website for current information at angel.com/freedom. That is angel.com/freedom. I have worked for many, many years fighting anti-trafficking and anti-trafficking cartels. Folks, it's up to each of us to do this together. You can make a difference. help spread this message worldwide. Go see that movie now. Get your tickets at angel.com/freedom. Sound of Freedom is in theaters now as we speak. Get your tickets today to help raise the awareness of this issue that often goes tragically unnoticed. Find a theater near you by visiting angel.com/freedom. By supporting Sound of Freedom, you will contribute in raising awareness and propelling a movement to save millions of children around the world. Get your tickets today at angel.com/freedom. That is angel.com/freedom. Hey, y'all, if you're not subscribed to my show here on YouTube and Rumble, please do. I don't want you to miss any of the great interviews and people that we bring on our show, just like Justin Goodman from White Coat, and people that can expose the truth and give you the tools that you'll need to make the right decision for you and your family. These are the great stories that I love to share with you. And thank you so much. It does make a difference. Talk about how the American government's funding of animal experimentation played a key role in the origin of the COVID-19 virus. Because guess what? That's what Senator Rand Paul's looking into. We spent 2 years of our lives, literally, some of us, some people dead, millions dead, people in hospitals, lockdowns, all because of gain of function, which we now know was backed by the NIH and Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, Sarah, that's right. And actually, the USDA kitten cannibalism experiments are a great segue because that's kind of how we got on the scent of the foreign laboratories. Back in 2018 and 2019, we exposed the kitten cannibal experiments at the USDA and how money, tax dollars were being used for these people to fly over to China and get these cats for the nasty cannibalism experiments. So we thought, what else is happening overseas? How else is our money being spent overseas? And what we discovered when we started digging into it is that the NIH authorized over 300 laboratories in dozens of foreign countries, including Russia and China, to receive tax dollars for animal experimentation. Hundreds of laboratories in foreign countries to receive U.S. tax dollars for animal experiments. Not only did we expose that, but we exposed an illegal loophole that we're currently suing the government over that completely exempts these foreign animal labs in China, Russia, and anywhere else, completely exempts them from following the rules that domestic U.S. animal laboratories have to follow. Animal welfare rules, biosafety rules. They're completely exempt from transparency, accountability, reporting, everything.
Oh, in this day and age when everything is global, they're exempting laboratories, bio-level 4s. I'm guessing some of them.
Yes.
Right?
Any and all laboratories in foreign countries are exempt from following U.S. rules. So that sets the stage for what happened here in Wuhan, right? So we're 2018, 2019, we're starting to look into what's happening overseas, and we find this list of hundreds of foreign labs that the that the NIH has made eligible for funding or was actively funding. And one of the laboratories that we flagged in late 2019 that was actively receiving taxpayer funding was the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We actually, this has been written up in a few news stories, we met with the Trump administration in January of 2020, pre-pandemic. I mean, the virus was circulating pre-pandemic to raise a red flag. We were like, Fauci's funding these labs in China, including the Wuhan Institute. Something needs, you need to investigate. We heard crickets. It took months to get the media to even pay attention. But what we ultimately discovered and exposed in April of 2020 was that Anthony Fauci was funding a laboratory in Wuhan to go into the caves in southern China, collect wild bat coronaviruses, and then fly them back to the middle of a major metropolitan city, Wuhan, and supercharge those viruses to make them more contagious to people and more deadly to people. So April 2020, we exposed the link between NIH and Wuhan, and that basically sets off a firestorm. And we've been working from then until now to defund the Wuhan lab. The next big thing that happened, so we followed the money from the NIH to Wuhan. We then did an investigation with the Freedom of Information Act and discovered emails in which, while there was a federal ban on gain of function from 2014 to 2017, under Biden and Obama, they banned gain of function from 14 to 17. While the ban was in place, Fauci's team was conspiring in writing with Peter Daszak and EcoHealth Alliance and the Wuhan lab. In writing, we have the emails where they're conspiring to violate the gain of function ban by letting the Wuhan lab essentially rewrite the definition of gain of function so that the ban didn't apply to them, and then ship money there for the experiments that we now know are the most likely cause of COVID and the deaths of 20 million people and crippling the global economy.
And no one pays the price.
That's right.
This is what is so, not yet. This is what is so frustrating to me, Justin, is that you're doing the yeoman's work, right? This is about now all of you who are listening, now do you see why Justin and the White Coat Waste Project is so important? Now do you see why groups like this must exist so that they can have oversight? Our government's not going to do it. I mean, you had Senator Rand Paul and a few others, but they were so afraid. So many lawmakers were so afraid of touching this. For that matter, the media as well, Justin. We couldn't even talk about this. People were like, what's going on? Where did this virus come from? It's like, well, don't question anything. Don't question Fauci. Don't question, Bricks. Don't question anybody who was working on this. It's like, well, no, I think we should be. I think we should be questioning everything, because you can't tell me that I have and I've had it 3 times. I've had COVID 3 times. I'm sure a lot of you people out there who are listening to us right now, maybe you, Justin, have had COVID. We have been infected with a virus that this laboratory weaponized for gain of function research. Not only are they just, and by the way, the kitten project, that is so gross and what mind actually thinks that way? Like, why would that even be I would love to get that scientist on the show and be like, okay, what were you actually trying to do with this? Are you trying to infect the planet? Because maybe that's through kittens. Like, that's the worst, right? Like
the USDA inducted that kitten abuser into its Hall of Fame, by the way. The USDA has a Hall of Fame and that guy is in it. That's the type of people our government is propping up, like monsters and, like Anthony Fauci and this guy at the USDA. These are like the poster children for, government science.
Right. I've really woken up. And you know what? Let's just be honest here. The reason that this needs to exist, these groups, because we all think like until COVID hit, I think the majority of people in the world and the majority of Americans wanted to trust their government, trusted their bureaucracies, trusted doctors and scientists. And then all of a sudden, the American people are waking up and going, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on here? Somebody NIH was funding this. We've got gain of function. And it's so great because, as a lobbyist, you are trying to get the truth out, right? You are trying to get lawmakers to pay attention. How hard is it for you when you go up against these industries like the NIH, you go up against the universities? I mean, look, you're a studious man, but you know what you're up against when it comes to these major university research centers and players. They've got to be coming after you, sometimes trying to get you to shut up, twist an arm of a lawmaker and say, well, we're not going to give you whatever. We're not going to donate to your campaign if you go along with this. I mean, am I right?
Oh, 100%. Like I was saying at the beginning here, I mean, animal testing is big business, $20 billion just in government funding, and that's probably the floor, not the ceiling. Now, colleges and universities are where 90% of the animal testing is happening. About 10% happens in the government's own labs, and we focus heavily on that because that's an area where Congress has direct authority. You know what I mean? It doesn't involve the intermediary of a university. Congress can go right to an NIH lab and say, shut this crap down. We don't want it anymore. Where once the money goes out and it's through a pass through like the university, it's the check's been cashed already by the time the university gets it. They don't care if white coat or people don't like what's happening. They got their money. They spent it already. Colleges and universities are getting about 90% of the money coming out of the NIH, and they are taking 25 to 30% off the top of these grants just for their university slush funds.
That's why they do it. That's why they do
So
it,
they could
Justin.
care less what's actually, they don't care if it's gain of function, torturing puppies and kittens. It doesn't matter. As long as they get their cut, they're happy to host it. And they will fight for it. And they will pay a lobbyist to go to Capitol Hill and fight for it to keep happening, even though if it's an existential threat to everyone who lives in the city where the university is located, as long as they get their cut, they're happy to let it happen and they will defend it to the death. We see it all over the place.
So this is such an important show, because this is about not only, I mean, for those of you who love animals, I do too. I mean, you don't want to see that kind of torture. You don't want to see these kind of bizarre experiments. Of course not. I don't think any human being really does. But let's say there's some people out there and they're like, well, look, I believe in animal research for cancer and this and that. This isn't about that. This is about wasteful spending of your taxpayer dollars on crazy, unheard of experiments, monstrous experiments that literally put humanity in danger. And we have now seen the reality of that with COVID. And by the way, I don't think we have all the answers. And this is what I wanted to ask you, Justin. You guys have the ability, which is, I think, is so important. I do too. Anybody does, but you do it well. With the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, you're able to gain and take to court these organizations and then get access to documentation. Are we fighting to find out all the truth about what happened during COVID? Because I feel like there's so many in the government that want to bury it and they want to pretend like, okay, we're moving on now. We're not going to talk about it. I mean, millions of people died. Our lives were turned upside down. Suicide rates went through the roof. And I'm talking not just the millions of people that died of COVID, but all the people that didn't go to the hospital to get their cancer checks or, their heart checked, or just their normal medical physicals that they do every year that eventually just found out, wow, you just came too late. Now you're going to die. I mean, there was a series of events that happened across the globe that changed everything for everyone. Are we investigating enough as to what happened? Because I'm afraid that we're just going to bury this COVID incident and 10 years from now or 5 years from now or 2 years from now, something far worse is going to happen.
It's been frustrating and eye-opening to see what's happened over the last 3 years. So we've been working on this since, late 2019, early 2020, trying to defund the Wuhan lab, trying to defund gain of function, trying to hold Fauci accountable, at least get answers for what the government knew and when they knew it, right? Because, you were talking about getting sick with COVID. You've been sick 3 times. I have the shots. I finally got sick this past January. It was the first time I got COVID. I was so sick. And I remember laying in bed, just writhing and thinking, there are individuals responsible for this. I know that there are individual people who made decisions and abused their authority, and I would argue did things that were illegal, that led to me and millions of other people getting this illness and to millions of people dying and to our global economy being crippled and us still feeling the effects of that. There are individuals like Anthony Fauci, like Peter Daszak, lots of other people inside the federal government who not only funded this in the first place, but knew there were problems over between 2016 and 2020 when the project started and the pandemic broke out. There were lots of warning signs of what was happening in Wuhan. The State Department warned in 2018 that they didn't have proper biosafety precautions and that they were sloppy and it was the Wild West. And there were lots of warning signs, but the arrogance of people like Anthony Fauci, the project just kept on going and no one really asked any questions. And they just, I guess, hoped for the best. Meanwhile, we're shipping money over to a lab with links to the People's Liberation Army run by the Chinese Communist Party, where there's no accountability and transparency about how our money is being spent, what's being done with it. No one's asking any questions. The first questions Fauci and others were asking was basically, how do we cover this up? It was never what actually happened there. It was, how do we take our fingerprints off of this?
Right.
That's the conversation that was happening in January 2020.
And if you don't remember, it's no big deal because there was so much information at the time. Like I know Senator Rand Paul was trying to investigate and there were others, but it was like they sent the fox to guard the hen house. Like I remember Steve Hilton, a good friend of mine, he was one of the few that actually started talking about it on his TV show and taking really big leaps of faith and like bringing people on with facts and saying like, look, you guys need to pay attention to this. But wasn't it like they had the fox guarding the hen house? Like Fauci ended up sending somebody from the NIH to do the inspection at Wuhan. And everybody's like, well, how's that an independent inspection? That's not.
It's even worse than that.
Right.
So number one, the loophole that I was talking about earlier, we don't do inspections of foreign labs. It doesn't happen. It's just, we don't even visit. It doesn't matter. We don't do that. It doesn't happen. It's never happened. In the history of the NIH funding foreign labs, they have literally never visited one. They told us that in the lawsuit we have going with them now. They admitted that.
Oh my!
So they've never visited the foreign lab.
So let me just reiterate this again.
Yeah, please.
For everyone there, listen to what he is saying. Say it one more time, because this is absolute insanity.
We exposed we exposed an illegal loophole a few years ago that the Government Accountability Office, the government's own watchdog, recently confirmed is true. We are suing the government over this. The U.S. government, the NIH, sends taxpayer dollars to hundreds of animal laboratories in foreign countries, including Russia and China. They've sent about $2 billion there over the last 10 years to these countries, $2 billion to foreign countries. And all these labs are completely exempt from U.S. regulations and oversight. No inspections, no paperwork, no reporting biosafety or animal welfare incidents, nothing. They get a check, and we wish them well and hope for the best. And what we have in a situation like with Wuhan is you have a recipe for disaster, shipping tax dollars to a foreign laboratory run by our enemies who would love to see us wiped off the face of the earth for for essentially what could amount to bioweapons research.
Right.
And then being surprised when exactly what happens happened. I mean,
and
that's
we don't
what people
even
have
know
been
what's
warning about.
Inside us. We don't even know what's inside us, Justin. And I keep telling this to everyone. We have a virus that spread globally. Some people died and were more susceptible to it than others. I knew it had to have been weaponized the minute I couldn't smell anything. And it was just the whole weirdness of this virus was not anything normal that anybody would have ever felt. But we still don't even know how that changed us, how it's going to affect us 10 years from now. And you talked about adversaries. This is very important. I need you, everyone who's listening to Justin, to really listen to this, because this is like beyond a scary sci-fi novel. Wuhan's not the only laboratory. There are laboratories in Pakistan, in other places throughout the world where there is no real inspections, where somebody could leave with sell a vial of the virus, illegally give it to a terrorist organization. Anything can happen. And we are funding it. We're funding it.
We just were able to finally, so last year we discovered a Kremlin-run laboratory in St. Petersburg, Russia, where they were crippling cats. They were damaging their spinal cords and forcing them to run on treadmills, similar to something you mentioned earlier. That was receiving taxpayer funding until recently. We were able to work with Congress to pressure the Biden administration to cut off Russian labs. That's great. That happened recently. However, there are still close to 36 Chinese laboratories eligible to get NIH money, including some that are run by the Chinese Communist Party. So we've been able to get the Wuhan Institute specifically disqualified from getting more taxpayer money. That took over 3 years to accomplish, though. The EcoHealth, the group that was sending the money to Wuhan, EcoHealth Alliance, is a nonprofit that basically does virus hunting and works with these foreign labs around the world. They're the ones who funneled Fauci's money to Wuhan. This organization that's broken the law, defied Congress, interfered with COVID investigations, they've received $50 million in new taxpayer money just since the pandemic started, and even got PPP bailout money for a pandemic they probably caused. The group that probably caused the pandemic got $1.5 million in pandemic bailout money, in addition to $50 million in new grants to do more virus hunting in remote parts of the world and dangerous virus engineering experiments. So we are continuing to fund the group that likely caused COVID. You
just can't make this stuff up. It's just that bad. It's just that bad. Yeah. What can be done, Justin? What are the steps that regular folks I mean, Americans like me, taxpayers, can how can we become more involved to stop this? Because I feel like our world is being run by these monsters that really do not care what we think or how we feel. I mean, how do we stop this? Because I don't want to see this ever happen again, right? I don't want to see this ever happen. If anything should never happen again. And by the way, shame on the Trump administration, shame on the Biden administration, on every administration for not holding these people accountable. I know everybody was scared in the beginning, but you should listen to those people that you briefed. They should have listened to you. And Fauci should have never been in that position of power over us, because the only reason he was there, in my opinion, was so that he could cover up for himself.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. He spent 3 years gaining the trust of the American public and the president at the time, and then abused his authority to cover up the most likely cause of the pandemic, based on, it's not just white coat waste saying this, or like right-wing pundits or, scientists. This is Biden's Department of Energy, Biden's FBI, scientists around the world believe that the pandemic was most likely caused by a lab leak in Wuhan. It's not a conspiracy theory anymore. Like everyone says, the conspiracy theory became the conspiracy fact. People were saying white coat was spewing nonsense and speculation, and that we were interfering with pandemic preparedness and response by raising the question about whether Fauci had a role in the pandemic. Like, what more important question could we be trying to possibly answer right now than how this pandemic started and how we could stop it from happening again? Like, did people forget already what the last 3 years was like? That's not going to be the last time this happens if people like Fauci and the people he installed in his agency when he left continue to run things the way they are. The only way I can see stopping this is literally cutting the purse strings, is making it impossible for these people to do this type of dangerous experimentation, putting common sense safeguards and guardrails on our money in place. That's what this is about. It's about reckless government spending with no regard for public health, never mind animal welfare, but no regard for public health and global health. Like,
no
300
oversight.
million people.
No oversight.
Yeah, there's no oversight of how this money is being spent. There's no accountability in terms of even just return on investment. This money is going to domestic laboratories and foreign laboratories. It's getting flushed down the toilet. Our health isn't improving. Our health is actually being degraded. Deadly pandemics are breaking out, yet we're raising the NIH's budget every year. It's insane. It's insane, which is why, our tagline now is stop the money, stop the madness. I mean, for us, it's a simple proposition. Stick to your guns, stop wasteful spending, and we're going to stop a lot of this stuff. We're going to prevent another pandemic. But if we keep spending the way we are, forking over money to the Chinese government and letting them do whatever the hell they want with it, I can promise you there's going to be another pandemic. It's just a matter of when.
Oh, you're 100% right. It's just absolute common sense. I think when I think about this, I think about how the government treated us, right? Like, just talk about, not only was our nation divided, you had the mask wearers versus the non-mask wearer. You had people confused about, what is this virus? What does this mean? Some people didn't even believe it. Some people did. There was just madness because nobody had anybody leading anyone in the right direction. There was no common sense at all. But the government turned on the people in a lot of ways. You better get your vaccines. You better do this. Do you want to save your grandma? Do you want to save your child? They came after the people. So no wonder we crumbled the way we did, and we were terrified and locked in. Yet they didn't do that to themselves. The government didn't double check themselves, did they? They put the onus all on the people who were the innocent victims of the government's radical experiments, while the government just sat back and said, well, we're going to do whatever we want. Hey, guess what? You guys got a couple million. Let's send that over to Pakistan. Wait, there's 3 more laboratories in China that haven't done enough kitten experiments. We haven't broken enough backs. Let's send that over there. Let's make sure that the Russians have everything they need. This is insane. Yeah. What can we do? All of us, remember, these are bipartisan issues. We should all be on board with this. Doesn't matter if you're Republican, doesn't matter if you're Democrat, doesn't matter if you like a big T-bone steak or if you're only eating curry at the great Indian restaurants throughout whatever state you are in that are vegetarian. I don't care.
Yeah.
This should be a bipartisan issue, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is. I mean, our membership, we have millions of members across the country, people of all political persuasions, the members of Congress we work with. Again, we work closely with Rand Paul. We work closely with Cory Booker. We work with everyone. It's anyone who is willing to sign their name on the line to stop government abuse of animals, whether it's going to cause a pandemic or just cause animals pain. And you don't have to support all of our campaigns, right? If you're concerned about gain of function and another pandemic, there's a home for you at White Coat. So, follow us at White Coat Waste on all the platforms. We always have action alerts posted up, different ways people can get involved, contact their members of Congress. We do tweet storms where we're just barraging bureaucrats at different agencies, making sure they're getting an avalanche of feedback from people that they want them to defund wasteful and cruel programs. We have some call-ins actually later this week against the VA for some kitten testing that it's doing over there. We're a taxpayer advocacy group, and we really rely on not only the generosity of taxpayers. We're a nonprofit. We run on small dollar donations from lots of people, $5, $10 donations. We don't have, we're not relying on big donors. So we're very much a taxpayer advocacy group, and we thrive and succeed the more people who are making their voices heard. So follow us on social, go to our website at whitecoatwaste.org. But like I said, ultimately, this is going to be an issue like any other big issue when we have a victory in DC. It's about people coming together, working towards a common goal and for a common cause. And this is one area where there really should be no disagreement. There's people on the fringes, on the very extreme ends, probably on both sides, who don't, for whatever crazy reasons, wouldn't want to support something like this.
Yeah.
But for reasonable people who want to make this country a better place and make sure animals aren't being tortured with our money, join the fight. Support White Coat Waste. We'd love to have you. And, Sara, again, this work wouldn't be possible, honestly, if you hadn't helped launch us really in 2015. We're so grateful for that. That's still one of the best pieces that's ever been done.
We got to do it again. We got to do it again, Justin. Yeah. We got to do it again. We can't let this. We got to do it again. I don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to do this again. I'm going to continue. I want you to come back on the show as a regular. I want this to be a part of our activism and exposing the truth and saving humanity and our beautiful planet, guys. We do not need to allow people like Fauci and others in, these doctors, these scientists in China that are like mad scientists and all over the world, experimenting with these gain of function experiments. There are amazing scientists out there. There are amazing people doing remarkable things. This is not it. We have to be smart enough, and we have to wake up, and we've got to support groups like whitecoatwasteproject.org, because they are going to get the FOIAs. They are going to get the truth. They are going to support and get the truth to members of Congress that don't have the time to do it. That's your job, Justin. And thank you so much for saving so many lives. And thank you for being a part of the show today. You're awesome.
Thanks, Sara.
I, for one, am blown away again, like I was in 2015. Thank God for White Coat. They do the hard work, right? They're out there getting the Freedom of Information Act requests. They're out there with the lawyers investigating. They're going to Congress. They're lobbying Congress. And not only that, they're digging up all of the information that our lawmakers, and by the way, we need to know what the truth really is. And they're the ones that are doing it. These are through FOIAs. Thank you so much, White Coat, for all that you do. Remember, folks, if you want to support White Coat, go to whitecoatwasteproject.org. That is whitecoatwasteproject.org. Their journalism and activism is inspiring. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless the future of humanity and every small creature that lives on this earth. And God bless the great state of Texas.